Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well today. In this video, we are discussing a bunch of news regarding Star Citizen. We have some medical changes that are going to be really solid. These address most of, if not all, the concerns players had over med gel costs and the ability to actually heal yourself. So I think you guys are going to really appreciate these changes. And then we're talking about some leaks that we got over the past few days, specifically from data mine files from the 4.3.1 build. There is some pretty big stuff in here, and if I'm going to tease anything, it's the fact that NYX gets mentioned a few times here. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit here. But before we get started, if you are enjoying the videos, feel free to stick around and subscribe. I do have channel memberships open if you wanted to go the extra mile, and feel free to join the community Discord. I would love to have you there, and a link for that will be down below. With that out of the way, though, this is some pretty big Star Citizen news, and let's jump right into it. Now, getting immediately into these medical changes, the first big one is that canisters will now hold 200 med gel rather than 100, basically cutting the cost of respawning in half to 50,000 UBC. Not sure if this is going to be a good final number. Of course, this stuff is going to change over time, but I do think it's a good starting point, especially given the current state of this game. And then this next change I really do love, and that is that tiered injuries now have different med gel costs rather than the flat 50 med gel that we had before. So healing a tier 3 injury will consume 5 med gel, tier 2, 10 med gel, and tier 1, 20 med gel. And that's equivalent to 2,500 AUC, 5,000, and 10,000. I think this change is excellent. I really don't know why they went with the initial flat fee of 50. Maybe that was just to get it in the game like really quickly and then they were going to adjust it. But regardless, this system is so much better, and I think I can appreciate it much more than what we had before. Now, the next change is that med beds have had their med gel capacity increase. So, tier 3 is going from 100 to 200, tier 2, 200 to 400, tier 1, 400 to 600. And then we also have respawn distance of tier 1 beds being increased from 150 million meters to 750 billion meters. Not going to convert that to these Star Citizen metrics, but it should be enough to cover most star systems. And then medical canisters will be added to long term persistence. I think these changes are pretty excellent for the current state of the game. I know medical gameplay has a long ways away until it becomes a viable kind of career path for players, but I do think these changes are going to be solid, especially for the balancing of people just constantly respawning, especially when you have like kind of bigger org battles. I know this is the big issue of just people like putting a Nursa or something in a really hard to get to spot and just constantly respawning out of it. I think that issue will be helped a ton with this change, but you never really know. I think regardless, this is going to be a good step in the right direction for medical gameplay, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it down below. All right, real quick, while I was editing this video, a CitizenCon Direct digital goodies pack dropped. This I will show the picture on screen, but it includes 2 new armor sets, a new undersuit, a new flight suit with helmet, a new jacket, 3 new FPS weapons, a CitizenCon challenge coin and trophy, as well as 3 new decor items. Now, I will say I really do like the flight suit that is front and center here. I'm a huge fan of this design, but it will be exclusive to the pack. So, as far as I'm concerned, this will not be something you can earn in game. I really hope down the line maybe it's possible, but as far as I'm concerned, you will have to pull out 35 bucks for this pack if you do want the flight suit. Now, for the armors on the right here, I know you can only see the outline of them, but they are looking pretty badass in my opinion. Of course, that's just the outline, and maybe they are totally something different than what I think they are, but they do look really cool, and I am excited to check those out. And then 3 new FPS weapons is also kind of crazy to see here. That means that we'll not only get these 3 FPS weapons in the pretty near future, but we also will see those at CitizenCon. So I'm really pumped for that. I mean, it took so long to get all these Volt weapons into the game this year that hearing that we are going to get 3 new FPS weapons is kind of crazy. But I am really looking forward to seeing all these things when they are revealed at CitizenCon. And if you are interested, this pack is now available for $35 on the pledge store. So feel free to check that out if you are interested. All right, now moving into some 4.3.1 stuff, just a heads up, this is going to slowly segue into some data mine things. So if you're not interested in that, this might be the best time to click off the video. But getting it started, we have the brand new OMC Heavy Utility Armor. Now, we'll have all the variants and stuff on screen, but by itself, I think this armor looks pretty cool. I know the helmet is pretty boxy and is a little bit more unique, but I can absolutely appreciate Star Citizen finally getting some more unique armors, and this year we've gotten so many, and I really, really appreciate that. I don't necessarily know what utility this is going to be specialized in, whether it's going to be mining or salvaging or anything like that. But I am excited to see that in the future. For now, I think it's a pretty good looking armor, and I'm excited to find it in the world. And then speaking of new armors, we have a reskin of the Artemix armor. This is a pirate edition, which will most likely come out this week. Looks pretty sick in my opinion. Of course, it's an Artemix armor. It looks awesome the way it is, but it does have a couple things that look more pirate themed. Across the board, though, I think it just looks like a good armor. And if you're interested in that, it should be releasing this week. All right, then real quick, we also have some pictures of the new Volt LMG with a couple of skins on it. Personally, big fan of the black and red, but across the board, this gun looks really solid. Unfortunately, I have not gotten my hands on it quite yet, but I am really looking forward to finally seeing this thing in the verse. All right, now the last couple things here for 4.3.1 is the loading screen. This obviously is the Apollo front and center. Looks really clean with a brand new skin that we haven't seen. I really do like the look of it. And then we also have a mention of Squadron 42 in the loading screen. I know it's kind of, a joke or whatever, but I do wonder if there's anything there that's actually hinting at something. Basically, it's just referring to a leak on set of a video adaptation of this book, and someone's wearing a Squadron 42 uniform. Really have no idea what that's referring to, if it is referring to anything, but I do think it's at least cool that they name drop Squadron 42 in the P2 loading screen. All right, now moving into some of these data mines. The first one here is a pretty big one, and that is what looks to be almost a variant of the Valacar. Now, we actually first saw this, I believe, at last year's CitizenCon in concept art, and it looks like it is now making its way into the game at some point in the near future, and that is called the Yormidi or the Rock Cracker. Now, I do have some pictures here to throw up on screen, nothing too crazy. It shows the face and then kind of how long this thing is. Personally, I am actually really excited for this. I loved seeing those concept art last year, and I'm very surprised to see any of that stuff even remotely getting close to being put in the game. But by itself, it looks really cool. There was also a ton of lines of just what it looks like attacks for this thing, referring to beams and whatnot. I don't really know exactly when this might actually come out, if it's part of the whole Onyx facility thing or if it's part of something else, but I do think it looks really cool, and I'm super excited to get more of those boss fight type of battles into the game, and I think this could be a really, really cool addition to that. I would love to hear your thoughts on this thing. I think it has a really cool, deadly look to it, and I think it could be a really cool boss fight as well. Do you think this will be a part of the Onyx facility stuff, or do you think it might be just something else entirely? I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And then we also do have a leak from the pipeline Discord specifically of the flight control services model being accessed through the data mines that we got lately. So this video isn't super exciting. I'll put it on screen, but it's not super exciting. It's really just someone flying around in a Gladius above ArcCorp. But the big thing here is that at some point early in the video, the person actually shuts off the engines for the Gladius. So it's able to actually just glide around ArcCorp without any thrusters at all, which I think is really cool and is one of the big things of control surfaces. Now, again, is the video exciting? Not really, but I am super pumped to get control surfaces in our hands. This is something that is almost guaranteed to be shown off at CitizenCon this year, and I also think has a decent chance of making it in our hands by the end of the year. Regardless of whether it does or not, it's very clear that it is work in progress and they are working on it, as we can see from this video. I think undeniably it is a super cool feature, and I'm really looking forward to having it in game. Again, not the most exciting footage, but certainly cool that we can see it for a little bit here before CIG actually officially announces it. All right, now moving into the NYX data mines, I'm going to go ahead and play the audio files for you, and then we're going to discuss some of the extra stuff after that.
Welcome to another SSN News Flash. I'm James Harriman. The UEE has met with High Command to discuss how to handle the increasing Vandal presence in the NYX system, as well as the continued activity from the Shattered Blade. Multiple activist groups have called for the Imperator and Senate to meet with the People's Alliance to discuss potential incorporation into the UEE. Now, supporters have suggested that the People's Alliance are ill-equipped to handle a sustained Vandal presence in the system and want to extend an olive branch, while critics question whether they would want to join the empire they fled or how the UEE would incorporate the unusual governing structure that they operate under. While Imperator Addison has maintained that regardless of their status within the UEE, the people of Levski are our allies. Be sure to check out SSN's live coverage of the Senate debates for further details. We're out of time. See you next time on Newsflash. This is James Harriman with your SSN Newsflash. Shocking news coming out of the NYX system as authorities announced they have identified the group responsible for selling Vandal bodies to Associated Science and Development's experiments under Dr. Logan Yoret. The group, calling themselves the Shattered Blade, have operated as black market dealers of contraband, specifically alien technology. Now, military officials have expressed concern that the activities of the Shattered Blade are potentially antagonizing hostilities with the Vandal and could instigate incursions into UEE systems. Authorities have been looking for more information about this group and those that have been subsidizing their activities. We'll keep you posted as the story develops. That's our newsflash. See you next time.
All right, now before we get too deep into that information, we're going to quickly mention some leaks about factions, that being the Vandal Hunters, Bounty Hunter Guild, Intersect, and Shattered Blade, as well as the possible mention of Vandal Blade AI, which we'll get into that in just a second. All right, so I think the big things to take out of this data mine is the connection with Shattered Blade. So ASD is buying from Shattered Blade these Vandal bodies, and then obviously Shattered Blade being a threat to the NYX system, and then the NYX system kind of wanting to reach out to UEE and maybe be incorporated. I actually don't think that's going to happen, but I think that's kind of a way of us getting introduced to the NYX system, which I do really like. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this just simply screams doing exactly what they did last year with Pyro. Obviously, they didn't do as good of a job last year because they didn't have server meshing and they really weren't putting much narrative content in the game. But it looks like they're trying just to do the exact same thing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to get nixed by the end of December like we did with Pyro. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's probably going to be a little bit of a slower burn, but I certainly think that this is absolutely an introduction to the NYX system. All right, so what I'm thinking here is that Shattered Blade is going to get a similar treatment to the Frontier Fighters, where they're kind of like the big bad guys of the NYX system, and they will be kind of the lore reason as to why we go to NYX. Now, whether that means that Shattered Blade will enter Pyro and we're going to have like conflict with them there, and then we'll kind of follow them back into NYX, similar to what we did with the Frontier Fighters slash Slicers. I'm not entirely sure, but it almost is guaranteed that the Shattered Blade is going to be the main reason lore wise that we go into Nyx. Now, the Vandal Hunters as well screams Nyx for obvious reasons. As we know from last year's CitizenCon, Vandal raids will be something that happens in Nyx, and that makes total sense for the Vandal Hunters to be based in the Nyx system. That's not confirmed, but I think really only makes sense. I know this is really just me getting a bunch of small puzzle pieces and trying to put them together, but undeniably, I think this is the introduction to Nyx. Now, whether or not that's within the next 3 months by the time 2025 ends, or it's within the next 6 months or a year, I have no idea. At this point, I wouldn't really know what to expect. Nyx is a much smaller system than Pyro, and given the fact that we saw some work in progress stuff at last year's CitizenCon, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me at all if the Nyx system was closer to launch than we initially realized. Now, again, that's not me sitting here saying that you should expect Nyx to release in the next 3 months. I'm just saying I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Now, before we start to wrap it up, there is one more data mine regarding abandoned underground facilities. Apparently, 86 are supposed to be added in one of these upcoming patches, I assume. 22 Unherson, 22 Crusader, 21 ArcCorp, and 21 Microtech. The mention of ArcCorp is obviously interesting, but I think that's probably just associated with the moons of ArcCorp. Again, all this stuff is data mined information, so even though there's a very good chance of it actually happening within the somewhat near future, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be in 4.3.1 or even the next patch after that. But given how the data mines have gone throughout the year, I wouldn't be surprised if this is associated with the October patch. And given the fact that that is the month of CitizenCon, I undeniably think we're probably going to hear something about this at CitizenCon Direct. So, regardless, is some pretty exciting stuff. With that out of the way, though, I want to turn it to you and ask your opinion on this. Do you think we could see Nyx within the next 3 months? Do you think it could be something leading into Squadron 42 where we get Nyx and Squadron 42? Regardless of what your thoughts are, I would love to hear them down below. We're really getting into that hype season of Star Citizen where we get shown a lot of things from CitizenCon and IAE. We're going to get the Perseus, all these big ship releases. It's going to be super exciting, but I really hope that CIG also, instead of just showing us things, actually gives us things in game to enjoy whilst we get all these big news drops. So, again, thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video and the news drop. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.